Wandering around the city streets at night always felt like a fever dream. The bright lights, obnoxiously loud noises, and strange people wandering around with their feet sagging behind them wasn't a new occurrence.
Haha! Are you ready for this?
You heard the music bump from a speaker attached to the roof of a nightclub you were just about to pass.
Zimzalabim!
You shook your head as you felt like you were beginning to develop a fever itself. The heat came and went in multiple successions, leaving you to wonder if you were either alright or somehow poisoned. Maybe, just maybe, in that small restaurant you just left. Before you knew it, you woke up. When had you fallen asleep? Gathering your surroundings was difficult, because your neck felt stiff and you couldn't move your arms to be able to rub your eyes with your hands. Had someone physically restrained you?
Wakey, wakey!
A soft voice called out childishly for you. Then, a low growl.
Damn it, bitch, I said wake up!
You were shaken violently by a pair of small hands that pushed onto both of your sides. After screaming out, your kidnapper finally spoke again.
Finally! I was worried that we hit you a bit too hard back there on the street. Nice to meet you. I'm Steph. I'm the ringleader here of our group.
You noticed you were in a carnival. People roamed about, but not only did they not do anything with the multiple rides that were turned on and had animatronics beckoning them to come their way, and try out the latest, coolest games, you couldn't see anyone's face. They were dressed top to bottom in black robes, their hoods covering their faces with the shadows aiding them. The moon shone brightly, curtaining its light onto the brightly but artificially lit game stands, creating an elegant contrast. You turned your back to her after your small sessions of scouting the area, yet you hadn't realized the scarring alongside both of the edges of her mouth. The sight of this elicited a small yelp from you, and you jumped back in reflex. She laughed and said,
Do I look like a monster? It's just a tattoo, no worries. It's not like it's permanent.
At this response, you rose an eyebrow, and she laughed again. You zoned out and noticed the faint sound of heavy metal playing in the background.
Oh, that.
She recognized the confusion in your eyes. A lot of our fans are heavy metal lovers. Steph untied the ropes that bound you. At the sight of the stinging red lines on your wrists, you grimaced. She held out her hand to you, and you hesitantly took it. With your hand in hers, you were pulled forward with every step she took, and it happened to be just a few strides in you noticed a large congestion of black smoke up ahead. Yet, as each second passed, the outline of a burning car began to make an appearance, faster and faster. In what felt like just a few minutes, the two of you were joined with a crowd of the area's quote-unquote friends who were mumbling a random chant while the fire crackled.
Repeat after me.
Steph put her hands together in prayer. Ich lieben aus der Biclea, is kupent madre monster, ausgemi flaugen bigom bi usgebot bear. It sounded like German with a sight of absolute gibberish. Steph then repeated the mantra along with the other people over and over again, voices uniting for the consistent repetition of the words. You stood there aimlessly, unable to speak even a word of the strange chant.
Why aren't you taking us?
You turned your head to the side in search of the unfamiliar voice to determine who spoke. However, nobody looked out of the ordinary. A few more seconds passed in which your brain didn't even think to process any words. Then, a demonic, high-pitched voice rang throughout your eardrums.
I said
You recoiled in response, shifting your weight to the direction of the new sound, and you were face to face with Steph, whose whitened eyes were barely bulging out of their sockets. Close were the membranous tissue of her eyeballs that you could almost feel met yours. That was it. You had to run. You had to run. To run. And so you did. With no direction, no idea of where to go, you sprinted as fast as your legs could take you on the grassy earth. Labored breathing was all you could exhaust out of your lungs. And upon realization of just how much harder it was getting to move with lactic acid building up at an extraordinary rate, you noticed you were running up a hill. Upon reaching the top of it, you were standing atop a cliff, and down below you witnessed an angler-like fish with tentacles resembling that of an octopus. Surrounded by it were bodies splattered with abstract patterns of blood.
That's the Fey monster.
A now familiar voice said. You turned around. Steph, standing in the front of a multitude of the robe-donned people, began to walk towards you and away from her group.
And this is the Edge of Glory. We send traders down there.
Traitors?
In one moment you blinked, and in the next, you were in a wide open space with horizontal bars in front of you that connected the two concrete walls on either side of you. Steph, who was now dressed in a white corset top with a bodycon black skirt, came in front of your cell and violently shook the handles of the steel cage. You crawled backwards on your butt, and she smirked maliciously. Greetings, Himeros, god of sexual desire, son of Aphrodite. Lay back and feast as this audio guides you through new and exciting positions.
You raised an eyebrow. What the hell was this woman talking about? You knew your own identity was up for debate. Then, Steph handed you a small pamphlet that held a few paragraphs of minuscule writing contained within the modestly tiny book.
Read it,
she said, and crossed her legs as soon as she planted herself on the aluminum lounger chair behind her. Perhaps it was there as she used it to keep an eye on you. Bringing your gaze back onto the small book, it wrote, "This is the manifesto of Mother Monster on GOAT, a government-owned alien territory in space. A birth of magnificent and magical proportions took place, but the birth was not finite. It was infinite. As the wombs numbered and the mitosis of the future begun, it was perceived that this infamous moment in life is not temporal. It is eternal." This was getting boring. Once again, you brought your eyes back to hers, and without a second glance, you threw the small book at her feet. Her brows furrowed, then she smirked, but visibly, you could tell she was infuriated. "This is the cult of Mother Monster, a group made for the order of the Great Lady. I invited you here because I was under the impression that you too were one of us. But how could I have ever been so wrong? I should have thrown you to the Fame Monster when I had the chance. Who would have thought that you could resist the charm hidden within the manifesto?" Steph grabbed the rods she had shaken earlier, but this time it wasn't her whole body shaking it. No, presently, only her arms were shuddering. At that point, the steel metal began to bend at her will, and she walked through the small circular opening she had created. In an instant, one of the other cult members handed her a knife from behind her, and she happily took it without turning back to look at where it was being placed onto her hand. Like muscle memory, she raised it. A glimmer of black in her eyes sparkled at the act she was dying to perform. Thankfully, Predicting her action was easier than you thought. You rolled onto your side, hopping through the small window of space she squeezed in from before, not looking back as soon as you heard a thump and a ding when the sharp metal collided with the blunt concrete ground. You hit the ground running for your life. Other cells began to creep open slowly, and out stepped multiple cult members dressed in rhinestone-studded bikinis, not bothering to do anything to stop you as you flew past them. Soon, you had already reached the exit of the prison. For some reason, the door was unlocked, but in reality, maybe that's what she wanted. You hadn't noticed her leave your cell earlier, so why was she in front of you? The bright sun blurred your eyes for a moment, so you raised your hand against your forehead to shield you. Both of you were in a desert, so not only did the giant star in the sky try to blind you, it tried to kill you with the sweltering heat as well. "Come back," Steph whispered in a siren-like voice, as if cooing would induce you to drop all your things and run to her in desperation. Fervently, you shook your head.
That was your last chance.
Now, you were existent to witness her transformation into a spirit-like demon. As her face contorted, her eyes lost all their soul. Her mouth was now gaping open with fangs replacing once human teeth. A few wrinkles took home on her forehead permanently. 2 horns emerged from her forehead. What else were you to do except stand there in shock? Like a villain explaining in great detail their plan to overtake the world and lose time to defeat the hero in the progress. You did nothing in response to the time it took for her to become what she had. In the time it took a pencil to drop, the terrain beneath her dusted in response to her pushing back against it with all her might in the process of colliding with you. Instinctively, you reached your hands out to block her, yet she was strong. She saw through your act and clasped her hands onto yours, then pulled you towards her. Both people's eyes widened, yours in shock, hers in excitement. She was really excited to finally strike you, wasn't she? Lurching forward, you leaned back as soon as you got a hold of your body's function once more. This allowed you to dodge her swipe she aimed at your face, and with another step backwards, you avoided another one to your chest. Angrily, she growled. Your attacker was obviously infuriated and getting increasingly impatient with each attempted hit you were able to predict. Dodging her occurred as long as she was persistent, but you were determined to get out of this mess unscathed. Unfortunately, it didn't go as planned. The monster used a low punch to get you to put both hands to cover your abdomen. Then she went in for the kill, hopping up to plant large needle-like fangs into the side of your neck. First, you gasped at the sudden intrusion and the discomfort it brought. Secondly, you snapped out of it, then bit her in the neck as well, mimicking her attacks. Third, you felt her ruffle around in her cape before pulling out the knife from earlier, but right before she was able to sink it into your skin, you twisted her wrist and snatched it with your other hand. Fourth, you stabbed her in the heart and twisted the knife. She screamed bloody Mary murder, so you used this opportunity to rip the knife out of her demonic body, grab her heart, then crack her skull to open up her head and grab her brain as well. You took a bite of both, and seeing as she howled and howled again and again, you crushed your canines back onto the organs, gazing through your eyes which were blinded by the blood that spurted from her heart. Tearfully, she said,
"He ate my heart and then he ate my brain."
As the last word escaped her dying, mortal body, she dissipated into a blue flame that, once burnt out, vanished. Up and down your chest moved as your strained breathing began to dwindle down. Once you came down from the adrenaline, you looked back towards the direction of the sun. Below the star was a cathedral-like building you walked towards. However, the moment you walked into it, you could see it was simply just a two-dimensional building that was one door. Through the other side, you could see a brilliant sunset dawning over hills of desert sand and dunes. In the middle depression of all the tan earth, there were a handful of pomegranates, their jeweled fruit splattered about that stained the sand blood red.